Dolly Parton's story of love is not loud or showy, despite her glittering public image. It is quiet, steadfast, and deeply human. For more than 6 decades, Carl Dean stood beside her, not on red carpets or stages, but in the steady, grounding way that allows another person to soar. They met when Dolly was just 18, a young woman with dreams bigger than the Tennessee hills she came from. Carl loved her before the wigs, before the fame, before the world knew her name. Their marriage endured not because it was perfect, but because it was chosen every day. In a life filled with applause and noise, Carl was her silence, her normalcy, her home. Losing him meant losing a rhythm she had followed for most of her life. Adjusting to that absence is not just grief, it is learning how to live in a world where your anchor is gone. The private man behind a public legend. Carl Dean was never interested in celebrity, and that may have been the very reason he was perfect for Dolly. While the world saw rhinestones and bright smiles, Carl preferred the quiet life, working, farming, driving, and living without spectacle. Dolly protected that privacy fiercely, understanding that their love survived because it was not consumed by public expectation. He didn't want her fame, didn't compete with her success, and didn't ask her to be anything other than herself. In interviews, Dolly often described him as independent, stubborn, funny, and loyal, a man content with solitude and deeply devoted in his own way. Their partnership thrived on trust, humor, and mutual respect. Carl's absence now leaves behind not only emotional grief, but the loss of the one place where Dolly didn't have to perform. He was her safe place, the one person who loved her simply for being Dolly. Grief that lives quietly. When Carl passed away, Dolly did not turn her sorrow into spectacle. Instead, she grieved the way she had lived her marriage, privately. She continued working, continued smiling, continued showing up, but beneath that familiar glow was a woman learning how to carry loss without the person who had always carried her. She has spoken gently about missing him, about changing habits, about adjusting to a life shaped by absence. Grief doesn't always arrive as collapse. Sometimes it comes as quiet moments where muscle memory reaches for someone who is no longer there. Dolly understands that kind of grief. She speaks of love not as something that ends, but as something that transforms. Carl lives on in her music, her memories, and the work she pours herself into. Healing for her is not forgetting, it is remembering with gratitude rather than pain. A life marked by early loss. Loss has never been a stranger to Dolly Parton. Long before fame, she learned that love and grief often travel together. Growing up poor in the Smoky Mountains, she witnessed hardship early and often. Later in life, she lost people who shaped her deeply, family members who believed in her talent before the world did. Each loss carved something out of her, but also added depth to her voice, her songwriting, and her compassion. These experiences taught her that sorrow does not make someone weaker. It makes them more aware of what truly matters. Dolly has never hidden from pain, but she has refused to let it harden her. Instead, she transformed it into songs, into generosity, into empathy for others who are hurting. Her life is not a story of uninterrupted joy, but of resilience shaped by loss. The strength behind the smile. Dolly Parton is famous for her warmth, her humor, and her kindness, but those traits are not accidental. They are choices. She has often said that being nice is something you work at, especially when life gives you reasons not to be. Behind her gentle demeanor is a sharp, disciplined mind and an emotional resilience forged through years of pressure, judgment, and misunderstanding. People underestimated her because she smiled. They mistook kindness for weakness. Dolly knew better. She learned how to protect herself without becoming bitter, how to assert boundaries without losing grace. Her sweetness became armor, not vulnerability. Even in moments of personal struggle, she chose faith, creativity, and connection over despair. That decision to keep going, to keep believing, became the foundation of her longevity. Her strength does not roar, it endures. Marriage in the shadow of fame. Being married to a global icon is not easy, and Dolly never pretended otherwise. Long separations, demanding schedules, and relentless public scrutiny tested her relationship with Carl over the years. Rumors followed her constantly, fueled by her charm, her flirtatious humor, and the assumptions people make about women in power. Dolly handled it all with wit and honesty, never allowing gossip to define her marriage. What sustained them was not perfection, but commitment. Carl understood her world without needing to belong to it. Dolly respected his independence without feeling abandoned by it. They gave each other room to be who they were, and that space became the glue that held them together. In an industry where relationships often burn fast and fade quickly, their quiet endurance became extraordinary. Dreams deferred, purpose reimagined. One of the most tender chapters of Dolly's life is the one that never happened. She longed to be a mother, dreamed of children, and imagined a future that ultimately wasn't possible for her. That loss carried its own kind of grief, one that doesn't announce itself but lingers quietly. Instead of allowing that pain to define her, Dolly reimagined motherhood in a different form. She poured her nurturing instincts into her music, her philanthropy, and especially into children's literacy through the Imagination Library. Millions of children have received books because of her belief that knowledge changes lives. Dolly's legacy proves that purpose doesn't disappear when dreams shift. It transforms. She found a way to give love where it was needed most, turning personal loss into global impact. Faith as a steady companion. Faith has always been a cornerstone of Dolly Parton's life, not as performance but as practice. Raised in a deeply spiritual household, she learned early that belief was not about perfection, but perseverance. During difficult seasons, emotional, physical, and personal, faith offered her grounding when answers were unclear. She speaks openly about prayer, gratitude, and leaning on something greater than herself. Faith did not erase her struggles, but it gave her language for hope and tools for endurance. It reminded her that pain is not the end of the story. For Dolly, spirituality is woven into her music, her generosity, and her worldview. It is quiet, consistent, and deeply personal, much like the love she shared with Carl, from poverty to possibility. Dolly's beginnings were humble in the truest sense. Born into poverty in a one-room cabin, she grew up with little material comfort, but an abundance of love, music, and imagination. Her family didn't have money, but they had stories, songs, and faith. Singing in church was her first stage, and even then people sensed something special. She learned early that dreams don't require permission, only persistence. Dolly worked relentlessly, writing songs, performing wherever she could, and refusing to let rejection define her worth. Poverty taught her resourcefulness. Faith taught her hope. Those early lessons shaped the woman she would become, one who never forgot where she came from and never stopped reaching forward, crafting an icon on her own terms. Dolly Parton did not stumble into her image. She created it deliberately. Every wig, outfit, and lyric was chosen with intention. She understood the power of presentation in a world that often judged women harshly. Instead of shrinking herself to fit expectations, she amplified who she was. Her look became a form of self-expression and control, allowing her to define herself before others could. Underneath the glamour was a serious artist and savvy businesswoman who knew exactly what she was doing. Dolly never apologized for being too much. She understood that authenticity, even exaggerated authenticity, was her greatest strength. By owning her image, she protected her inner self. Carrying love into the final chapters. As Dolly grows older, questions about slowing down naturally arise. She acknowledges them with humor, honesty, and grace. While she may adjust how she works, her passion remains unchanged. Music, storytelling, and connection continue to give her life meaning, especially now. Carl's presence may no longer be physical, but it is deeply woven into everything she does. Love does not vanish with death, it evolves. Dolly carries that love forward, honoring it not through sadness, but through continued creation. Each song, each smile, each act of kindness becomes a quiet tribute to the man who walked beside her for most of her life. A legacy built on soft strength. Dolly Parton's greatest magic is not her fame, her voice, or her style. It is her ability to remain soft in a hard world. She has endured loss, disappointment, pressure, and change without losing her compassion. Her story reminds us that strength does not always look like toughness. Sometimes it looks like kindness that refuses to disappear. Through heartbreak and joy alike, Dolly chose grace. She turned pain into purpose, privacy into power, and love into legacy. In doing so, she became more than an icon. She became a reminder that gentleness, when protected and intentional, can be the most powerful force of all.